All right guys, welcome to the video on Project LT500R. The clock is winding down for the 250R Legends Tour, the TRX 250R Legends Tour in Waynoka, Oklahoma. I plan on having this bike there and it is less than 2 months away. So I got limited time, I'm gonna get right to the build. But let me give you guys a quick rundown of some of the parts that we've got for the build. So we've got some Lone Star +2+1 A-arms. A lot of nice anodized bits all about. You see like the tie rods are anodized there and the brake line clamp anodized there. We got some nice custom rotors, front brake rotors, and a lot of nice little pieces all over. Some true ASV levers, front clutch and brake levers. We got some Renthal fat bars here. We've got some other anodized bits, a PWR radiator. It's an upgraded, oversized radiator for the LT500. That's actually kind of a hard piece to come by. It's got a brand new Duncan Racing front bumper, the legendary front bumper. It's got some Elka front shocks. It's a factory frame. It's a 1990 model year to match the 1990 fenders. And while I'm getting to the fenders, this is a brand new OEM set of LT500R fenders, never been mounted on a bike, a brand new nose piece, fronts, rears, and it's actually even got a brand new seat still in the original packaging. I'll open that up later and show you guys the seat pan and the cover. That was quite the find. It's also got a Michael David Steiner rebuilt engine. This is another piece of candy in all that saran wrap. We've got a brand new hold stock, I'll call it, Dr. Q exhaust system. This exhaust system has been sitting in a box for I think about 10 years or so. I haven't even put the Dr. Q sticker on the silencer yet. It's also got a +2 Lone Star swing arm and a +2 Lone Star axle, as well as a lot of awesome billet pieces you can see all throughout. Even the eccentric's been anodized. OEM grab bar, been chromed. We have an SCR. This is a SCR dual carb kit. Hopefully I'll get to share more information on that later. But this bumps the displacement up to about a 60 millimeter carb. So this thing will get plenty of airflow, and I'm excited to see how it performs. But yeah, guys, that's about it. The quick and dirty rundown of some of the parts we have for this build. I'm excited to share it with you guys. But yeah, I gotta get going because this bike has to be ready within under 2 months. And I got this bike and Project LT250R hopefully be ripping in the dunes in under 2 months.
You know I'm not one to break promises. I don't wanna hurt you, but I need to breathe.
So I got the frame up on the stand on this Pit Posse ATV lift. I highly recommend them. I would never build another bike without this stand. It saves your back. So one thing for you Zilla enthusiasts that you might have known seen right out of the gate is you're like, whoa, wait a second. There's only two upper A-arm mounts here. Clearly this is an 87 frame and not a 1990 frame. You would be correct in saying that, except for this rare case where this frame's actually been modified. They've removed the inner upper A-arm tabs. You can actually, if you look close, you can still see some weld right there and right in there. They did that, the previous builder of this bike did that because they were running these Lone Star +2+1 A-arms, and in the pictures, it looks like it only works for an 87, right? You got this big crossbar piece, but what you realize when you look closer is this is actually removable. And they didn't have to do that to the frame, but it is a 1990 frame, despite the modifications made that made it look like an 87. For you non-Zilla enthusiasts, I've got an 87, an 88, an 89 Zilla here, and I'll show you really quickly the differences. You can see the upper A-arms on an 87. This is a very easy indicator for what year it is, if it's an 87 or if it's not an 87. These upper A-arms have this square tubing there. And there's also one big bolt that goes all the way through the upper A-arm mount, and it's mounted by 2 tabs. Whereas if we zoom out, we go to this 88, the 88 has the traditional A-arm with 2 mounts and therefore 4 mounting brackets. The same thing is true with the 89 and also with the 90, except for in the case of this 90, obviously it's been modified to accept these A-arms, even though technically the Lone Star A-arms are awesome, and they've got this removable bit to work on 87 or 88, 89, and 90. One quick note, I was gonna show you guys, I told you I'd show you guys this seat. This is a new old stock seat. I'll take the cover off in a bit, but I was just walking by this and I had to take a video of it. Look at this freaking thing. It's crazy. I mean, look at the hardware for where it clamps into the seat mount bracket. This thing is just insane. It's literally a brand new seat. One thing I was also gonna mention, when you're storing ATV seats, or honestly any seats, the big areas where they always rip and tear are right here and then right up here. And that's because usually people will take these seats and they'll just lay them flat. I won't touch this one, but let's see here. Got another seat here on this little LT50, but I got a 250 quad racer seat here. And so the majority of people will take the seat and they'll set it on the concrete like this, and then they'll move it around and stuff like that. It almost pains me to do that. What ends up happening is this gets worn thin and then ends up tearing right there. And then your seat cover is no longer good. And obviously things are only original once, so it's really hard to see that happen to an original seat cover. So whenever I store seats, I usually try to find the softest, best area to put them. And in the case of this seat, I really wanted to make sure it was sitting in a very safe way. So I've got the back of it resting on foam, the front of it resting on foam, and I actually flip it upside down just to make sure that these points don't hit the ground. One more housekeeping item before I start building. Zilla fenders are very susceptible to cracking actually when they're off the bike. There's only 2 points where they're actually joined, and that's the very, very front and then that little crossbar there. What'll end up happening if you just set the fenders on the ground or you just let them kind of do what they want naturally, these points right here will split ways and they'll end up bowing out, and they will end up cracking that crossbar or just kind of getting a little bit deformed, and you really don't want that. So I would recommend always kind of tying the ends right there together just to make sure that it doesn't spread out on you. And another thing I was gonna tell you is don't ever store bikes with their nose pieces mounted up. You'll end up getting cracks right in the area right up by the seat. That whole area will crack. So you'll see, like right here, we're storing this 89 Zilla, this, you know, mint original 89 Zilla, and I don't have the nose piece mounted up intentionally to prevent cracking. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stress right in that area, and even from the factory, the nose pieces will actually crack if they're just sitting there on a bike. All right, the first order of business is installing the engine. Just like on Project LT500r, we're gonna start with the engine. This is also a Michael David Steiner engine, and it's gorgeous. I already did you guys a favor. I already undid the back side, so let's unwrap this thing and check it out. Jeez. This is actually my first time seeing it too. Goodness sakes. It just, I mean, it looks wet. Like, he does such a good job on these engines. Obviously, he can build the whole thing internally, but then on the exterior, he makes it look like a work of art. I can't say enough good things about Michael David Steiner. I'll try to get in the link of the video. I'll try to get some way to contact him in there. Oh my gosh, so look at this thing. This thing is just drop dead gorgeous. It actually is a little bit different shade of the blue than what's gonna be on the rest of the bike, but it probably won't even matter. This thing's amazing. A couple quick things that Mike did to this motor. He reinforced the cylinder ears, it's called. The previous ears on the cylinder are prone to cracking, and they're only about this tall, so there's only, you know, about a ½ inch of aluminum that is gotta hold up to all the pressure of the piston going up and firing and everything. There's a lot of forces going on here. And so what he does is he adds an aluminum collar here, and then he tigs it all in, and it looks gorgeous. You probably may not have even noticed it if I hadn't pointed it out. But he fixes that problem. He did that on both sides. He also back cut the gears in the transmission. I won't get into that, but basically that is going to help us shift under a load, which is awesome. For you guys that may not know, this is called the jug or the cylinder. This is called the head, and this is your lower end, your bottom end. This is your water pump cover. This is actually your power valve window. Your power valve assembly's in there. This is not, despite what some people think, your oil fill level. Definitely don't fill your lower end with enough oil to where you see it there. You will have a lot of problems. And that's just a quick walk around of the engine. Another thing that he did, you can see he reinforced the ear over here. Another thing that he did, this chain guard bolt boss was broken. You'll see that commonly on honestly any engine. If you ever throw your chain, it gets bound up in here, and then it breaks the chain saver or the case saver, and it usually snaps this in the process as well. There's two mounts for the case saver down there and then up there. And this one was broken. He fixed it, and you probably never even know that it was ever broken. One thing, this is not Mike's doing, but this is a kind of a custom little piece. This is an SCR, a company back in the 80s called Suzuki Country Racing, built a dual carb setup, and this was your basically your intake for the dual carb setup. So I've got the dual carb setup here. And this is, again, like I said, from the 80s, but it's pretty cool. It's basically just a mod to increase your airflow, right? So there wasn't a carburetor big enough, so they just said, well, maybe we could just run two carburetors, and that'll increase the airflow like we want to. Two carburetors, it's got a 2-into-1 throttle cable, familiar on Banshees and stuff like that, where they all have two cylinders, two carburetors. But that will be run on here. It'll increase the displacement to about a 60mm carburetor, so this motor should have no problem getting air. But yeah, that's just a quick rundown of some basic things that Mike did, along with obviously make it look like a work of art. In case you guys missed on project LT500r, I've kind of got a method for installing motors. Installing motors by yourself can be kind of a difficult task, but I've got what I think is a pretty good system built up for it. So I run my engine mount bolts in from this direction. It's all based off a swing arm pivot bolt, which can only go this direction, and I like to have all my bolts go in the same direction. That's just a personal preference. You can actually do both directions, but what I'd recommend is you set your bolts in this little sleeve right here and get it ready so that you don't have to go fishing for your bolt once you're kind of trying to carry your motor and get it all into place. Get your bolt ready to go, and then actually I'd really recommend getting one of these lifts. I mentioned it a lot of times. But one of the reasons is on your motor, your bottom lower engine mount, you're gonna have one of these spacers. And these spacers actually go right here for a Zilla. And what I just did is I shifted the frame over to the outer edge of this opening here. And that's gonna allow me great access from the bottom, once my motor's in here, to put this sleeve in where I need it to go. Once my motor's in, obviously, I won't be able to access anything from the top. So that's why this cutout in this stand is super and crucial. I'm just gonna install the motor in real time right here. So I'm gonna lay this cloth down just to protect the engine while I rest it here for a second. And all right, got the engine. I would also recommend doing some workouts from time to time. It'll really help you when it comes to this stage of the process. I'm gonna go in here, try to get it as little frame contact as possible, just to protect this gorgeous paint job. I've got it in there now. My bolt hole is not very lined up right now. I'm gonna go up with it, get it right about there. I should be close. I'll come to this side. And yeah, I'm very close at this point. So I can take it, and there's no pressure on my back or anything right now. Like this is very easy in the grand scheme of how hard it could be. So right there, I've got my bolt hole lined up. I'm going to take the engine, get a little bit of weight off of it, help me slide my bolt in. So I've got my bolt slid a lot of the way through at this point, and then I'll show you a different view with the camera. So now we're underneath the engine. This is the big cutout in the stand, and because of this big cutout, this right here, this little gap right here, is exactly where my spacer is supposed to go. And so I've got great access to get my spacer installed here, and it's just gonna slip right into place. And then I'm actually gonna take my brass hammer really quick and just tap on the end of the bolt and just drive it in. See how that turns out. Probably not very good. Yep. So I've got my spacer, the bolt's already started to go in it. I'm just tapping in my bolts with my brass hammer and getting the bolts already in there. So the weight of the engine is making the hole not line up over there. So I'm gonna go lift up and get that to all line up. Should just be as easy as lifting up on this side of the engine. There we go. Simple as that.
I don't wanna hurt you, but I need to breathe. At the end of it all, you're still my best friend.
So I'm about to install the swing arm on this Zilla, and I must forewarn you, installing a swing arm, the whole rear shock system on these bikes is actually kind of difficult. But it is really a pain in the butt if you screw up this little guy right here. So this is called the eccentric. Basically what the eccentric does is it rotates when your shock is in its compression cycle, and it basically just allows the rear end to not get bound up when the spring is going up and down. The swing arm is, pivoting up and down. But what happens on a lot of these bikes, I've seen it time and time again, the eccentric gets mounted up to the swing arm in the wrong position, and dependent on the position that it's mounted up, whether it's rotated like this or whether it's rotated 180 degrees the opposite way like this, it makes all the difference in the world on how your bike sits, and it'll look really goofy. The back end of the bike will be kicked way up in the air if that is incorrect. So to show you a correct example, up here you can see an eccentric. And basically the reference point, you'll know where the bolt goes in, and then you want to see the two holes exposed on the bottom side, on the front bottom side of the the bike. So basically that is the proper orientation that you'll want to see your eccentric in. So for our bike right here, let's see, so we're looking at the left side of the frame, we'll be looking at the left side of the frame here. So I want to see those two holes facing the front, so I will rotate this back roughly right about there, right? And then I'll mount my swing arm up accordingly, and my bike will sit properly. All right, one last housekeeping item. I promise this is the last one before I install the swing arm. I would make sure to grease this bolt before you put it in. This is your swing arm pivot bolt. It goes right through that hole and then all the way across through your swing arm, through your engine, and then right over there. If you don't grease this, they commonly seize, and it'll be like almost impossible to get the bolt out. So make sure that you grease it. All right, so once again, I'm going to try and do one of the most difficult pieces to install on the Zilla. I'm gonna try to do it in real time, and we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to throw my swing arm pivot bolt in here and try to not let it overhang, even though it's actually a little inevitable that it will overhang just a bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my swing arm in place and ready to go. So I'm actually installing the entire swing arm assembly here, including the axle and everything, just because it's already together. It makes it a little bit harder, but I'm just gonna keep it together for the sake of time. That 250R Legends Tour is right around the corner. So I'm gonna try and put... swing arm in there, and actually I did bump out that swing arm pivot bolt, which will make me have to get a little flexible here and hold that up while I pick this up. So now, really just fishing for that swing arm pivot bolt hole, which I just found, which is awesome. So now, I've got my swing arm at least suspended for a second, which is good. And I'm now going to try and basically just tilt the motor back just a little bit so I can hopefully line up the engine mount with perfect. So I got that there. So now the engine and the swing arm are actually supported by the bolts. I need to get my brass hammer, which I should have grabbed before. I'll go back into position. I also moved the frame forward a little bit on the stand because there's a lot of weight over the rear end right now, and so the whole frame would want to tilt back, but I pushed it forward to try to get the weight more centered. So now I've got it in the engine and through the swing arm. So now I'm actually through the other side of the swing arm as well. I just have to get it to line up with the other frame hole. And actually on Zilla frames, well, I stand corrected a little bit. What I was gonna say is on Zilla frames, sometimes it's really hard to line up that swing arm pivot bolt because on the 87 model year, there was less support in that area and the frames were very prone to bowing and getting kind of out of alignment. But the 88 and up frames have a lot more rigidity and support built in there, so it keeps the frames very straight and true. So that actually went right in. That was actually, all things considered, pretty easy. And so now, actually, before I mount up my eccentric, I'm going to install my rear shock. This really helps when the eccentric is bolted up, it's actually really difficult to get the shock in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the shock in there. The commenters will probably say, why are you using a rear shock or a stock rear shock when pretty much everything else on the bike is aftermarket? And simply it's because I forgot to source an Alco rear shock for this bike and I am out of time. But this is actually a pretty nice OEM rear shock. It all functions and moves really well, so it'll be totally fine on the bike. In the future, I'll go ahead and probably try to source an Alco one just to get a full matching set. These spacers here, these little guys, you want to make sure you have both of them. They're very commonly lost. I'd run a zip tie through these actually if you don't have them in a bike, but even when you're installing them in a bike, make sure they don't fall out like one just did there for me. So I'm gonna bring this in here. The reservoir bolt wants to face forward for the remote reservoir. I'm going to route this to so I'm actually looking up, I'm referencing my 89 that's sitting up on the shelf right now. This needs to go chain side actually. So this is going to go up and then be routed to the left, and it'll sit right here actually. The reservoir will sit right about here whenever it's done. For right now, I'm just going to set it out of the way. Gotta run my bolt through right here. Beautiful. I'll line up my eccentric down low. I'm sweating because it's really humid. It's right here. My eccentric is lined up almost. This might need a little bit of tender love care. I was being an idiot, and what I should have been doing is lifting the swing arm, clearing up all the space in the world for me to mount up my shock and eccentric. So right about there, just like that. The bolt is now through. The shock is now mounted up. I've still got to run this eccentric bolt really quick, and the big thing double, triple check as many times as you need to. Make sure that eccentric is in the right position, which, all right, I'll double check. The holes, like I said, are supposed to be facing forward, down, and facing forward, which is what they are. So now I'm going to lift my swing arm up into place, run my bolt into place, hopefully get lucky, and there we go. Everything has the bolts run through it. Now I just have to tighten everything up, and that was overall fairly easy. I'm sweating a little bit, but it's really just because it's like 90 something degrees here right now. But yeah, that actually went pretty good, all things considered. All right, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and go to the front end now. The first thing that you want to install before you install your steering stem or your radiator or anything is your coil. It's this little electrical guy here. You want to install that first because it's held in by these machine screws. Technically, you could upgrade these to just regular, hex head bolts, but to be OEM spec still, just for the heck of it, these are machine screws. These are the factory screws you're going to use. So when you put your stem and radiator in there and stuff, you can no longer access the head of these machine screws with a Phillips or anything. So you need to install your coil first. It'll just help you out in the long run. So we'll install that now.
You know I'm not one to break promises. I don't wanna hurt you, but I need to break.
So I just installed the steering stem. This is the steering stem mount. There should be some metal sleeves in here, and when those are in there, you can bottom out the bolts on the sleeves and not on the plastic, which is what holds the stem. And because of that, you should be able to get these pretty snug, and your stem should still rotate freely, but also be very, very tight, obviously. After that, so long as you've got the factory bolts, steering stem mount bolts in there, you want to use these spring cotter pins, or from the factory they just come with regular cotter pins. I just use these because they're removable. They're a lot more easy to install and remove, in my opinion. Just push that guy in there, and pretty simple. But run those in there just so that your steering stem bolts don't back out. These will stop it from backing out. But also know, if you're disassembling a bike, to not just be cranking on this bolt, trying to loosen it, because what'll happen is this will bottom out against that nut that's welded to the frame, and then the force of this will be more than what the threads can take, and you'll strip out your threads, and you'll have to go through the route of redoing those threads. So just be aware that these pins could be in there when you're disassembling a bike. All right, I'm just gonna jump right ahead to the front end. So I'm gonna install that. One really crucial point of information is this is an 87 upper A-arm mount bolt. It's a really long bolt, which also means there's a ton of surface area for that bolt to get dried out and seize. I just dipped this thing in oil, and I'm about to install it. That'll keep it loose throughout the years, keep it moist in there, which is good. I've seen this bolt on both sides and the swing arm pivot bolt seize up numerous times, so just make sure that they're always oiled or greased. All right, we made great progress on day one of Project LT500R. I got to wrap things up. I've actually only been working for probably like an hour and a half, so we made really good progress. And I'm at a good stopping point. I threw the bars up there just because My brake lines were still connected to my calipers down there, and so I needed a place to put my brake reservoir, my master cylinder, and everything. So I just wanted to put it up there. Anyways, it's really starting to take shape already. I was actually a little nervous about the blue paint and the blue on the frame being a little bit different shades, but honestly, they look fine. All the blues on this bike are really gonna pop and really go together. LT500R, Project LT500R and Project LT250R are gonna be a gorgeous, gorgeous pair. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Drop any comments, questions, anything down below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.